So for the last couple weeks, we have just reviewed, and we've also pulled in a little bit of science with our review. Starting today, and for the next few weeks, we're going to shift into social studies and start a new domain called People Who Fought for a Cause. Now, this is a new domain, and it's about people in our history who felt they needed to make a change. These people didn't actually fight, it just means they worked hard to reach their goal. Before I begin our story today, I'm going to back up and share with you some new words to listen for and possibly make some connections with. So your first word to listen for today, my turn, civil rights, your turn. The definition means rights guaranteed by a nation's government to all of its citizens. And a sentence that can be used, or you can have a sentence that you share with your parents and family at home. Martin Luther King Jr. wanted civil rights, such as the right to vote for all people. Your next word to listen for is actually your word of the day. This is my turn, courage, your turn. This means bravery when facing difficulty or danger. So when I think of this word, I think of what's going on in our world right now, and I think about what we call those people who are working the front lines. I think about the nurses and the doctors and the paramedics. They have to have courage to do the work that they're doing. So at the end of the lesson, we'll review this word, and then you can talk about this more with your family. Listen today for my turn, discrimination, your turn. Good. An act of unfair or unjust treatment of a person or a group of people based on traits such as their skin color, their race, or their religion. As an African American, Jackie Robinson experienced racial discrimination when he was unable to eat at the same restaurant as his white teammates. The next word, my turn, equal rights, your turn. Good. All citizens sharing the same rights without discrimination. It says, with regard to voting, men and women now enjoy equal rights. And again, you all can create your own sentences with these words. Another word to listen for is my turn, inequality, your turn. Good. The condition of not being treated the same as others. It says Susan B. Anthony fought against the inequality of voting rights for women. Another word to listen for is nonviolence. So my turn, nonviolence, your turn. Good. The practice of responding to unfairness by refusing to take physical action. Many people who worked hard towards equal rights in this country did so through nonviolence. So what I'm going to do right now is introduce to you the 7 people that you're going to meet today, and then we will take each person one day at a time, and you can learn more about them as we go throughout the next weeks together. The first lady you will meet today is Susan B. Anthony. She is a woman who fought in slavery, so she did work with abolitionists to end, at the end of the Civil War. She fought to end slavery, and she fought to get women the right to vote, right at 100 years ago actually. And she fought for the right to vote long before women were allowed to vote. And you'll learn more about her in a couple of days. And then we have Eleanor Roosevelt. She fought for all people. She fought for them to have the right to a better life with a good education and a good job. This next lady you will meet is Mary McLeod Bethune. She helped to get better educational opportunities for people. And she even worked with Eleanor Roosevelt and several United States presidents to improve people's lives. And then we have Jackie Robinson. Those of you who have read about him, I know you already love learning about him. This is Jackie Robinson, and he worked to make it possible for African Americans to play professional sports. You've probably already met Rosa Parks, and I know we've talked about Martin Luther King Jr., but let's talk for a moment about Rosa. She helped make life fairer and better for African Americans living in the South 100 years after the Civil War. So this was the 1950s and the 1960s. And of course, MLK Jr. He did many things to make life better for all Americans. And you know, there's a special day set aside each year in January when our whole country takes time out to remember all the wonderful things he accomplished during his lifetime. And the last man that you will meet is Cesar Chavez. He saw that some workers were being treated very badly and did not receive a fair amount of money for all the hard work that they did. So Cesar Chavez helped organize people to change the situation. So those are the 7 people you will meet today. And your goal today is to listen for how each person in today's text tried to improve the lives of others. I will begin reading your text today, and you're more than welcome to pause the video and stop and talk about each person as we come to them, or you can wait till the end, that's fine. Again, this is your goal. There'll be 7 people who you will learn fought for a cause for our country, and you'll also learn what each of them did to improve the lives of Americans. People who fought for a cause. This first slide I'm going to share with you is people asking to be heard in our country. So throughout history, people have had to stand up and demand they be treated fairly. They have fought for equal rights for themselves and for others. Now remember, my turn, equal rights, your turn. Good. Remember, those rights are things that a person should have. Equal rights are those rights that everybody should have. You have to be very brave to stand up for what you believe in. Over the next couple weeks, you'll find out about 7 people who took a stand against, my turn, inequality, your turn. Good. And demanded certain rights. So once again, remember, inequality means that different people or different groups are not treated the same. So one of the groups is not being treated fairly. You'll discover that most of these people lived a long time ago, but what they achieved still affects us today. They made the world a much fairer place. They fought for equal rights for everyone. The next slide, we will talk about civil rights. One of the types or categories of rights of people have been called, my turn, civil rights, your turn. Good. Civil rights are those rights the government gives to people. Civil rights in the United States include freedom of speech, the right to vote, and protection from discrimination. So my turn, discrimination, your turn. And that means is when someone is being treated unfairly because of things like their religion or the color of their skin. Civil rights also include the right to be treated equal under the law. Different countries have different ideas about civil rights, but the people you'll hear about in this domain all live in the United States. So you're going to learn about civil rights and other people in our country. Many of the people in the stories that follow had to fight for some of the rights we take for granted. And I want you to understand that to take something for granted means to not think about something and just assume that you'll always have it. However, these people did not fight with violence. They fought with words and with peaceful actions. As a result, they changed our world for a better place. The next slide is going to show you what life was like years ago. They're called monarchs. Not a monarch butterfly, but this is more like kings and military leaders. For a very long time, people were not protected by any rights at all. For hundreds, even thousands of years, people were at the mercy of those in charge. Monarchs such as kings, military leaders, or tribal leaders governed with what was known as an iron fist. Now, think for a moment, does an iron fist mean sweet and kind? Or do you think that iron fist means strong and strict? You're right, it was strong and strict. Over time, people began to demand some rights. They wanted to select their leaders, they wanted to vote, they wanted to own property, and they wanted the right to practice a religion the way they wanted to. So eventually monarchs changed their ways, or they were replaced by elected governments. Gradually, those governments started giving people civil rights, which meant that people would be treated more fairly. The U.S. government has made this promise to treat people more fairly. Sadly, when governments do not guarantee rights, people face great difficulties. Often the most basic human needs, such as enough food to eat, a safe place to live, and a good education and a job, are denied. We should never forget how lucky we are to live in a country that cares about people and their rights. United States. However, the government and some more powerful groups of people have not always treated everyone fairly and equally, and they kept certain groups of people from having the same rights. Some very brave people have fought to change this. The next slide you will see is about women's rights. For a very long time in parts of the world, women did not have the right to vote, even here in America. It wasn't until the 1920s, so 100 years ago, that all women were granted or given the right to vote. This change to the law happened after, this is an example of this, women protested, marched, and campaigned for this right. Now please understand that protest means to show that you are upset with something. To campaign means to take part in activities that are intended to change people's minds, or to convince or even persuade them of something. The next slide I have for you is a civil rights protest. Until the mid-1860s, so around Civil War time, in parts of the United States, many African Americans were slaves. Even after slavery was abolished or ended in some states, African Americans did not have the same legal rights as white people and were not treated equally. In the South, for example, African Americans were not allowed to attend certain schools or even eat at certain restaurants. Barriers or blockades were also placed in their way when African Americans tried to vote. So in this domain, you're going to learn about two people who helped to defeat or end this, my turn, inequality, your turn. Good. With their supporters, they marched, they campaigned, and demanded equal rights under the law until finally, in 1964, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. This act removed unfair laws by prohibiting or ending, my turn, discrimination, your turn. Good. The following year, the Voting Rights Act removed all voting barriers for African Americans. This meant that African Americans would be allowed to vote just like all Americans without facing discrimination. The next slide you'll see is the Declaration of Independence. We're going way back in history. Throughout the history of our country, there have been certain people dedicated to making sure that all citizens have their civil rights that they deserve. Thomas Jefferson, one of our founding fathers, wrote these words, "All men are created equal." He wrote these words a very long time ago in the document that we know as the Declaration of Independence. This document was a letter of protest against the unfair treatment of the colonists by the British. The colonists fought for their rights and freedoms and founded a new nation, the United States of America. In this domain, and for the next few weeks, you will learn about those 7 individuals who, like Thomas Jefferson and the other founding fathers, stood up for what they believed in. And today, you're just going to get a quick introduction and summary of their achievements for each and for what they're known about. Now again, I'll begin to introduce these people to you and share a little bit about them. You're more than welcome to pause the video and talk about how they improved the lives of others, or continue through the video and talk about it at the end. And anything that your child has questions about, since I'm not there to answer those or find those questions for you guys, talk about it. If there's still questions after your conversation, feel free to message me and we will work on this together, I promise. So this is Susan B. Anthony. She thought that women should have the same educational and employment opportunities as men. This means she fought for both girls and women to be able to go to school and get the same kind of jobs for boys and men, the same kind of jobs boys and men could get. She dedicated her whole life to making the world a fairer place for women. And the next lady to learn about is Eleanor Roosevelt. She worked to improve the quality of life for many groups of people, but especially children, women, Native Americans, and African Americans. She was concerned about the fact that girls did not have the same educational opportunities as boys, and that far too many African Americans lived in poverty. She traveled all over America. She talked to the poor and the needy. She encouraged her husband, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, to make changes that would reduce poverty and let everyone live a better life. Our next lady to listen about and to find out how she improved the lives of others is Bethune. Mary worked to create educational opportunities for African American girls during the time when there were separate schools for children of different skin color. She started a school in Florida that later became a college. Some people in her community did not like what she was doing, and they tried to stop her. They bullied her, but she would not give up. Eventually, Mary became so successful that several U.S. presidents sought her advice on how to make this country a fair place for all. And our next American hero would be Jackie Robinson. Jackie was bright, well-educated, and a terrific athlete. He became the first African American to play Major League Baseball. When Jackie first began playing Major League Baseball, some of his fellow team members and fans treated him badly. Jackie did not give up. Because of his, my turn, courage, your turn, and talent, he changed people's attitudes or their views about things. Just remember that courage is bravery that one demonstrates during a difficult time. And the next individual is Rosa Parks. On a cold December evening many years ago, an African American named Rosa Parks sat on a crowded bus. When the bus driver asked her to give up her seat to a white man who did not have a seat, she refused. She found the courage to say no. After Rosa was arrested, people came together and decided that they would not ride the Montgomery city buses until everyone had the same rights as white people. This was the beginning of the civil rights movement that challenged unfair laws in the South. Again, that was about 100 years after the Civil War. Of course, I think we all know MLK Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. is perhaps the most famous member of the civil rights movement. He believed in bringing about change through nonviolence. Remember, that's a refusal to take physical action against someone who is treating people badly or unfairly. In 1965, nearly 1/2 of African Americans lived in poverty, and many experienced discrimination every day. Because of Martin's leadership, the civil rights movement forced change and helped to create opportunities for many people who had experienced discrimination. It became against the law to discriminate against someone because of race, color, religion, or the country in which they were born in. And our last individual today is Cesar Chavez. He knew firsthand about how hard it was to be a farm worker who had to travel from farm to farm. He knew that farm workers who did this type of work earned very little money for all the hard work they had to do. In 1962, Cesar and his friend organized thousands of farm workers into a group called a union. Because so many people came together as part of this union and demanded change, Cesar found a way to improve the lives of all farm workers. The people you will learn about, you're learning about today and you'll learn about the next few weeks, have had courage. Sometimes they were bullied or sometimes they were threatened, but this did not stop them from doing what they knew was right. As you hear about these stories, think about how different life was all those years ago when these people set out to make the world a better place. So this is a pausing point. At this time, feel free to pause and talk or stop the video and talk about how each of these individuals, these American heroes, have improved lives for others. That'll be your conversation to have today. And remember, your word of the day is courage. Actually, I'm going to share a little bit more about courage right now for things for you to have a conversation about or to think about. And if you have time later today, you have a story in your packet, either online or in your packet with your paper. It's called Martin Luther King, and it's already printed for you. So let's go ahead and work on your word of the day. Let me skip through these comprehension questions. Slowly but surely. Okay, here is your word of the day. The word is, my turn, courage, your turn, good. And in our text you heard, Because of his courage and talent, he changed people's attitudes or their views about things. Once again, courage means being able to do something that may be frightening or even intimidating. Maybe you're scared to do it or have fear. Here's a sentence. John knew that he had found the courage he needed to climb that mountain. So here are some conversation starters that you all can talk about at home. If you had to find the courage to do something, what would it be? Of course, this says share with your students in class, but this is something to share with your family at home. That's a great conversation starter. You can also just try to use it in a sentence. Like old times, I would love to hear from you. I would love for you to dojo me your sentence, or even if you want to tell me what you've learned today, I'd love to hear from you. If not, that's okay too. I just want you to know that I'm always loving the thoughts of hearing from you guys. You can also play this game. We have a thumbs up for courage, a thumbs down for not courage. And here are your choices. So you all can pause the video and talk as a family. And this may be different for each of you, but here are your choices. Watch a scary movie, ride a bike, play flashlight tag in the dark, go to the dentist, take a test, or go on vacation. So if you want to stop the video and play this with your parents, go for it. I hope you enjoyed today's text, and I'll be back more this week with Susan B. Anthony. Bye, guys.